Hi, we are delighted to have with us Bate Toms, managing partner at BC Toms & Co. law firm and chair of the British Ukrainian Chamber of Commerce. Bate, it is great to see you. How are you doing?
I'm doing fine. Could be better if we didn't have this COVID around and we had the normal flight schedules, but I'm still going back and forth between London and Kiev.
Okay, well, indeed, I think for many of our members do know you, but just for those that haven't had the opportunity to meet Bate, I think Bate is a legend, one of the lawyers that was first on the ground here in Ukraine, and he's taught so many lawyers, and I think he's passed on his knowledge and his experience and sharing. But Bates, I mean, if you can just give us a brief update of how you started off in Ukraine and some of the great work you've been doing here.
Well, I studied law at Yale Law School in Cambridge, and I came to Ukraine almost by accident. I was head of the Yale Law School Alumni Association Europe, and we'd organized events in a lot of cities. And after our event in Germany, with the president of Germany and a number of other top alumni, it was suggested that we should do something in Moscow, as I'd done Soviet studies at the Political Institute in Paris, Institut d'études politiques. So I took that on. It turned out to be a much bigger challenge than I realized. I organized a parallel conference with Soviet and US government officials. And at the end of that, the head of all the lawyers in the Soviet Union thanked me and said that they would be deeply grateful always for what I'd organized. And he walked off, and the general counsel of Best Foods, standing next to me, hired me to do the legal work in the Soviet Union. That's how it began, just by accident. I then focused everything I was doing on the Soviet Union. I thought that was going to be a future for me. I, shall we say, had a jump. But actually, things changed. With the coup in Moscow, Best Foods pulled out of Moscow and moved everything to Kiev, and I followed them. So I ended up being the first Western lawyer to set up in Ukraine. And with that, I did the first IPO in the country. I did the first true project financing in the country, both for JKX Oil and Gas. The IPO raised $500 million. I actually initiated the largest energy investment in the history of Ukraine and handled the legal work for Vitol and GeoAlliance. I handled the biggest cross-border agricultural investment ever done. And I also won the biggest bilateral treaty arbitration case for about $150 million in the Permanent Court of Arbitration in The Hague to get back an investment lost by an oil and gas company. Done a lot of IT work, done a lot of work in minerals. So it's been a varied practice. I've especially done a lot in energy and agriculture.
Brilliant. Well, I know the members are very grateful for all the support you provided and everything you do to make Ukraine a better place where to conduct business. So just tell us, the last 239 days, I think it's been now, we've been living in a new reality, a totally different business environment. What has it been for lawyers? I mean, what are the challenges and what are the opportunities you've seen for the legal business and for business generally in Ukraine over the last 6 months during this pandemic?
Well, real disappointment in terms of the number of projects that have been suspended, especially for us in the agricultural sector, inward investments. People simply don't want to travel because of COVID. And nobody wants to invest without being able to kick the tires. So that slowed down. On the other hand, we picked up investment in other areas, irrigation, infrastructure, and that's really leading us now, and a variety of other activities. And I spent a lot more time than usual, although, as you know, I spend a lot of time on pro bono activity. but I'm now heavily focused on trying to clean up the judicial system, trying to promote political risk insurance at the World Bank level with MEGA, irrigation farming, law reform generally. A lot of people don't realize some of the very important problems that still exist in Ukrainian law that are not resolved. It is extremely difficult to do a proper due diligence in Ukraine because the notaries have closed their books to inspection, alleging that it's necessary for client privacy. It's not. Normally, when you buy a property, you take over in the West all of the background to the property you bought. You're buying all the previous transactions and their records, but not in Ukraine. That has to be changed. We continue to represent investors who buy real estate and the due diligence hasn't been thorough enough and they end up being cheated. So that's a particular area, but there are lots. I've got about 70 problems in Ukrainian law that we're working to try to get solved. We have solved some. One in particular, agricultural land leases were invalid until our proposal was adopted to abolish 2 amendments to the land lease law that have been added by some corporate raiders. There still is a problem for land leases executed between 2008 and March 2016. Not many people know about that. We're campaigning to get that fixed as well. There are other things. Let me just think. For irrigation farming, 10 years ago, there was a study by the World Bank. It's still going on, I believe. But what we need now is not more study, but we need real action and in a great hurry. The last part of irrigation farming, the build out from the source of water to the farms, can be done relatively quickly. We can do this, and I have a proposal for this, working with the State Water Board on it. You can do this without legislation on a contractual basis, like it was originally done in the US. But what you can't do is you can't build out the final connection for mile after mile. It's very important that Ukraine, together with the World Bank, builds out the irrigation farming in areas like Mykolaiv and Odessa in particular. Kherson, it needs to redredge the system that was built by the Soviets. It's a fairly broad system, can be improved. But it wasn't finished in Mykolaiv Oblast, and it was barely begun in Odessa Oblast. And that needs to be done urgently because that takes time. And if we don't do that, then we're going to have horrible yields like we're getting this year. They're going to get worse and worse. And there will even be an increasing spread of desert. A lot of people don't know, but Kherson has the largest desert in Europe. And those conditions can spread. So this is a national crisis. It's an urgent situation. It will also bring a huge amount of investment into southern Ukraine and stimulate a lot of economic growth.
Well, yeah, absolutely. I think on the irrigation point, this is something that the president, during the presentation of the economic strategy, that they actually had as a top priority for the country moving forward. So I think, you know, they'll be hopefully coming to you for your advice and assistance on this.
Other things, MEGA, the World Bank branch, gives special political risk insurance for every country in conflict in the world except Ukraine. There's no reason for that. We've been pushing for the program that was adopted for the West Bank and Gaza to be adopted for Ukraine. That would produce a night and day change in the level of investment coming into Ukraine. I can't think of anything that will stimulate investment greater than that. But there is another parallel thing that needs to be done, and that is we desperately need to have control over the amount of corruption in the court system. There are 2 branches to that. You're well aware of the problems they're having with the Constitutional Court. And I will be coming out with some suggestions for how that can be resolved. It is a problem, but for the commercial court system, for the regular general courts, it's not so difficult. There's been a solution already tried that succeeded. In the early 1900s, the most corrupt courts in Europe were in Sweden. Sweden was then a relatively poor country. About half the country moved to Minnesota. And when they began to improve their country, one of the measures they adopted was a legal ombudsman, a judicial ombudsman, who could supervise the action of judges. The problem with what's gone on so far, I wrote a paper on this when the previous reforms were adopted. The problem is they don't focus on what judges do. The illustration of judges hasn't focused on their decisions. It is very easy to review the quality of a judicial decision and see how that matches with law. There is a standard under all of Ukraine's investment treaties for bilateral investment treaties, BITs, a standard for arbitration of judicial decisions that constitute denials of justice. And that is that there's no reasonable justification for the decision. Not that it was a close decision and you don't like the outcome. Judge went one way instead of the other way. That's part of the judicial system. But that there's no genuine basis for the decision. No well-advised commercial investor should ever end up in a situation where it could go this way or that way. If it's like that, there's a genuine basis to take down his license or his investment, then his lawyers haven't performed. But if they have, then he should be secure, unless somehow the judges involved can come up with a decision that has actually no basis in law. And we've seen hundreds of those since I've been in Ukraine. I've been involved in about 40, 50 defenses of corporate raids using the courts where the judicial decisions have no genuine legal basis. I don't know of another country in the world that has this problem to this magnitude. And the solution is for the parliament and the president to come up with a system where they appoint a judicial ombudsman who reads, if people think they've been so cheated, if the decision has no basis in law, they can take it to him. Not in 8 years for bilateral investment treaty arbitration, at which time the judge has pocketed his money and in one case I had moved to Monaco, but immediately. Not in 8 years when the investment will have changed hands 3 times, you can't possibly get it back, and you're just claiming for money against the state of Ukraine. We need to get it back in real time so that the investor doesn't actually lose his investment. No one will invest just to have an arbitration in 8 years. So the judicial ombudsman works in Sweden. I started 30 years ago. I am now the senior Western lawyer in the country. There are only 2 other people with a background similar to mine. I'm involved in lots of litigation and arbitration, and I have tried to thoroughly study this. It is, to my judgment, it is the only solution, but it's a very good and easy solution. It can be implemented quickly. If there's a decision that has no genuine legal basis, the decision says black instead of white, then you send the case back for rehearing. The judicial ombudsman doesn't function as a judge, he functions as a review. If the judgment is defective, he sends it back for rehearing at the same level, and he should be able to institute an investigation of the judge. Illustration of judges, we need to get into both for the Constitutional Court. That's a separate topic. We have suggestions for that.
Brilliant. Good. So Bates, so this series of videos is about leadership in times of crisis. What is leadership in times of crisis?
Well, it's initially tightening your belt and getting good control of your finances. We went through this. We had a lot of projects suspended. fairly short notice. I think leadership is making clear your expectations to the people around you, keeping them informed as to how things are going. We actually haven't diminished in size during COVID, but it's been a lot harder. So I guess lead from the front. I'm working rather harder than I ever have.
Brilliant. And then finally, what would your one message be to the members of the American Chamber of Commerce here in Ukraine?
I think that it would be along the lines of Warren Buffett. When people are fearful, it's time to buy. COVID will be contained. We will have to live with it. We can't go away. But there are huge bargains to be had. There are solar businesses to be bought. There are farms to be developed. There's a lot of opportunity, oil and gas, et cetera, especially in minerals. I see a lot of mineral investments that were developed that are not now being funded. So for an investor, it's a picnic. I think it's a good time to invest.
Brilliant. Well, thank you. Thank you, Bate Soms, managing partner at BC Soms & Co. and the chair of the British Ukrainian Chamber of Commerce, a great friend of the American Chamber of Commerce, a great friend of
Absolutely. We enjoy
Ukraine.
working with you, Andy.
Stay healthy, stay safe, and I hope to see you soon. Thank you, Bates. Have a good one.
Good to talk. Bye-bye.